tower defense level where you just get attacked by waves of enemies and then at the end you dust your hands off and get back on the road. But dialogue within the game files seemed to suggest that this cult was originally supposed to be led by a ghoul named Harold, who shows up in both Fallout 1 and 2, which would have been both a cute callback to the other games and would have made this whole segment a lot more interesting. You'd even get a glimpse into their weird prophecies and beliefs. But all that remains in-game is that sometimes other acolytes will say, "Any see Harold lately?" Which might just be a way to memorialize a dead plotline, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was something they just forgot to delete because it contains either a typo or just bizarre syntax. Like all the other guys talk rather eloquently about, dumping chemicals in their pants. Along the way, the super mutant attacks have been relentless, so much so that Barnaky's replacement, Decker, begins to suspect that they are being fed information about their tactics. This turns out to be right on the money. They are able to track down where the super mutant leader dwells, and the squad arrives to find him on the brink of death. In his confused ramblings, he mentions that they lost Barnaky. They had meant to bring him back to their base, but were met by a force much stronger than them, and he was taken. In his half-dead state, he mistook you for their leader, Gamoran, which turns out to be not only a human, but a former Brotherhood paladin, who, mid-battle, attempts to get you to see reason, to understand his motives, despite them being kinda unclear, begging you to see the severity of the undead enemy. And it really did give me pause. It made me wonder, whose side was I on, really? And are we so different from our...
You have completed the objective.
This is actually, unfortunately, the most interesting plot idea this game has, and it's completely broken. There's enough scraps left in the game files for you to see what they were going for, but as it stands, this just seems to be a crazy ex-paladin that wound up leading the super mutants for reasons we will never fully understand. So what I'm assuming was supposed to happen was you kill this guy and probably feel conflicted about it. Sounded as though he was about to explain himself before we gunned him down. We then find a hollow disk journal belonging to him, which is still in the game. It's right. It's right here. I guess wherever place in between reality that highlights here that's where it is. You can pick it up and look at it, but you can't listen to it. This does seem to trigger new dialogue when you finish the mission. Decker tells you that you found the journal of Paladin Latham, the former identity of Gamoran. He was on one of the airships that the rest of the Brotherhood had assumed was lost completely. And that's it. He's dead. We're gonna have a funeral for him in the garage later. In the game files, though, you can find the unimplemented holodisk dialogue that would have played after you defeated him. And it's not only a great performance, it completely fucks with the morality of this mission and most of the Brotherhood's actions throughout the game. It also makes Latham/Gamoran a far more compelling villain. After his airship crashed, his squad was taken prisoner by super mutants. Not wanting to die a slave to his enemy, he challenged their leader, also named Gamoran, to a duel, hand-to-hand combat to the death. A fight that, even to his surprise, ended with him as the victor. With Gamoran dead, the other super mutants respected him enough to just follow his lead from there on out. He was quite literally just made the new Gamoran. Unfortunately, the Herculean task of defeating a super mutant with his bare hands also left him with severe brain damage that slowly began to affect his judgment and grip on reality, having fits of anger and hallucinations.
This morning, I thought I was attacked by a deathclaw. Too far from my SMG, I lashed out with my ripper, slashing the beast's throat. My vision cleared in time to see Nathan the scribe's eyes go cloudy, his neck in ruin, his blood covering my hands.
In a really intriguing choice, part of this journal is also devoted to his observations of the super mutants. He describes them as intelligent and far more capable of kindness and compassion than he was taught by the Brotherhood.
While considered stupid by many, they show a loyalty stronger than I've seen in many humans. They live life the only way they know how.
These dudes we've been killing the whole time are actually kinda chill when you humanize them for a goddamn second. As Latham's condition worsened, he was eventually confronted by a squad of Brotherhood paladins, though ones that no longer resembled the Brotherhood he knew. These fellas, flying his former colors, start gunning down super mutants, and he finally snaps, seeing the Brotherhood as inhuman for their treatment of his new green buddies.
I finally know who I am. I am Gamoran, sworn enemy of the menace from the west.
After this initial fight, he became aware of a new threat that even the super mutants had no chance of surviving. So it's likely in his final moments there, he was trying to explain that they needed to work together, but the Brotherhood wasn't really interested in hearing him out. If you ain't human, I had enough of human. If you're green, you've got time to clean. This really does seem like the sort of thesis statement of the entire game, really. The end game for its almost there theme of systemic racism, and it's just not in its place. Because the Brotherhood of Steel, at least this flavor of them, are cops, right? They provide this veneer of protection, safety, but really they just serve the interest of capital, money, tech, power. The whole business is rotten at its foundations. They are trained to be a hateful, insular little cult. Nobody trusts them or likes them all that much either. For no real reason, you can interact with this guy who tells you about his sister falling in love with a reformed raider. She did the impossible. She fixed a smelly boy. But the Brotherhood threw both of them in a labor camp where she was mistreated, abused, and worked to death, all for consorting with raider scum.
Look, this place is bad enough with these robots. Last thing we need is you Brotherhood bullies moving in. Why don't you take your big brother tyranny somewhere else?
You can say, hey, I'm gonna be one of the good ones. I'm gonna save the super mutant pacifists. And then Decker informs you that they've confiscated their research as a bargaining chip. You can save the ghouls, but then they steal their sacred nuke. You can save the Deathclaw, but then I don't know what you do with those. I think that genuinely might have been my bad. You just can't win. Abolish the Brotherhood? Defund the Brotherhood? People are saying this. I don't know. Either way, absent. Holodiscs as a means of doling out plot were in general supposed to be a feature in the game, and more of them were recorded and are just sitting there on the disc with no way to listen to them in game. So I mean, technically this game has a very interesting plot on the disc. It's shipped with that content. You just have to really give a shit to experience it. It's not long before the real threat to the Brotherhood reveals itself, and I'd say from here forward the plot does take a turn into a big idea that is interesting for sure, but feels pretty removed from what I appreciate about Fallout. The big bad at the center of the story is an army of robots. Yes, just saying that fills me with a feeling I can only categorize as defeat, because it's a little too big, it's too broad sci-fi. They do their darndest to make it interesting and have it feel homogenous with the rest of it, but it's hard to deny that from here on out, it becomes the robot game. Certainly hope they don't revisit humanoid robots anytime in the future. That would be silly. That would be kind of f***ing dumb. The biggest issue with this robot army is that nobody is really good at killing them. Bullets and explosives hardly make a dent in their metal bodies, so they turn to another Micro Forte OC group, a technology-obsessed religious sect called the Reavers, for help. Well, not at first. At first, they're just another group of jerks raiding towns for supplies and tech parts. But eventually, their forces are split, fighting the robots and the Brotherhood. Determining the robots to be a greater threat, they send a Reaver delegate to a Brotherhood base to create a temporary alliance against the robots, offering in exchange the knowledge of how to build EMP weapons that are highly effective against the robots, allowing the Brotherhood of Steel to take out structures they've built to repair themselves and manufacture weaponry. As we move closer and closer to Vault Zero, setting up Brotherhood outposts along the way, it becomes evident that the robots seem to be coming from the vault, appearing in greater numbers the closer they get to it. Eventually, we uncover how this came to be through recordings of Vault Tech scientists. The mysterious computer system that was meant to oversee all the vaults was a revolutionary and highly unethical device device called the calculator, essentially a supercomputer that uses human brains stored in cryotubes as hard drives, containing, quite literally, the brightest minds of their time. Unfinished and without further administration, it sets about the task of restoring order and safety on the surface in the cold, clinical way that made sense to it. This included killing most of the vault dwellers within and leaving the remaining who attempted to reel it back under control with brain damage. The saving grace of this idea for me is the particulars of why this failed so miserably, which is so patently Fallout that it redeems it. This lofty goal of a biomechanical vault overlord failed not because of some malevolent glitch in its programming or the machinations of a mad scientist. It was budget cuts. The management at Vault-Tec decided that the likelihood of a complete nuclear annihilation was looking, unlikely. We're better than that. We, as humans, you know, we fight and we fight, but I think deep down, everybody knows. And cut the budget for the calculator project by tens of billions of dollars, instead funneling that money into more practical upgrades to Vault Zero, like smoking rooms and piano bars, as well as a hunting ground where you could hunt rare endangered animals. For a while it seems like the Brotherhood is coming out on top of this fight with the robots. That is, until they switch tactics and kidnap a traveling merchant that has followed your journey towards Vault Zero since the beginning. This is concerning because that means this merchant has detailed knowledge about where all of the Brotherhood bases are, and how much of a threat each one poses. So the squad is sent, realistically, to kill him before he can reveal anything compromising to them. Luckily, we find him still alive, but barely. Though he has been tortured and dismembered by the robots, he never talked and only asked that you let the paladins know that and put him out of his misery. It's a little sad, but it also sounds like a successful mission. Let's go!
Yeah, we did it. God damn it, they got my boy, Barnaky. I'm gonna commit a hate crime against ghouls in your honor, buddy. You would have liked that. You're such an asshole.
Thinking it's time to make one all-or-nothing assault on the calculator before we give the robots enough time to regroup, the Brotherhood formulates a plan. While the rest of their forces stay and protect their nearest bunker, the player's squad will transport the nuclear warhead they collected earlier and promised to protect to the front door of Vault Zero and detonate it, seeing this as their best shot at penetrating a vault door designed to withstand exactly such a scenario. Thankfully, this works, and the squad is able to enter and make their way to the calculator's domain. But before that, they are confronted by what has become of General Barnaky. His brain has been made to power a large robot body that is programmed to protect the calculator at all costs. You could engage in a fight with him and defeat him, but if by chance you took his locket off his lobotomized corpse and held onto it until this confrontation, he'll seem to come to his senses. The memory of his wife overpowering the robotic manipulation done to his thoughts. He instead just walks you over to the calculator and in a confused stupor says, like, I guess do whatever you gotta do. I don't really know what's what anymore. He just kind of stands in the corner muttering to himself about Maria. For a game with a pretty minimal plot, at least compared to its predecessors, there are surprisingly 4 endings, with the option that seemed to make the most sense being one of the worst ones. Robo Barnaky is a bit of an emotional wreck because of what he's become, but he does have enough lucidity to suggest that instead of blowing up the calculator, he could just put his brain into it and thus control all the robots, making them a tool for the Brotherhood. Doing this stops their assault on the Brotherhood and elsewhere across the wasteland, and at first seems pretty ideal. The Brotherhood is pretty much unstoppable, and the robots are used to protect settlements and bases, but the part that he didn't really share with us was his plan to enact genocide on all people affected by mutation. So for any mutants or ghouls, it's on site pretty much. I guess it's not too surprising since Barnaky said a lot of cruel shit concerning these marginalized groups.
While most of our elders believe ghouls are almost our equals, I do not agree.
Yeah, well, guess what? Now you're like 95% robot, okay? So I don't see you as an equal. I'm sorry. I was just saying
Don't look at me like that. Don't look at me that same way you always look at me. But much of the story feels like this mission of unity, bringing all these people together for a common goal, even if that was often sort of just a byproduct. So it feels extra fucked up that this is what he chose to do with his newfound power. Offering your own brain to the calculator is of course an option, and the result is determined by your karma rating. If you killed many innocent characters throughout your playthrough, mutants and other new races will not be targeted. Instead, you will wind up assassinating the Brotherhood's leaders and use your robot hive mind to whatever end your character sees fit, good or bad. Presumably bad, since you killed all those innocent people to get there. If you had somehow resisted the urge to kill innocents, this is the closest thing to a good ending. Neither the Brotherhood nor the Wasteland's marginalized people are threatened, and some manner of temporary peace is administered by a combination of the Brotherhood and their new robot buddies. The only uncertainty comes from the fact that it's a lot of trust to put into one dude's brain. This is hard to pull off though, because in order to get to the prompt to insert your own brain, you have to kill all the brains attached to the calculator, which are all technically innocent people, so each one you destroy is a substantial dose of negative karma. There's a lawyer brain, a politician brain, a porn star brain, and even a game developer brain that shares some fourth wall breaking goofs about the game's design. So hopefully, with this gamer brain's demise, mankind will be instructed how to shower and not be toxic. You could also let the calculator self-destruct, ending the threat, but also making seemingly the most significant power in the Wasteland useless, and also making Vault Zero useless, other than being a cool place to store your Nuka-Cola. My biggest issue with Fallout Tactics concerning its story is that it seems really disjointed for a while, and like it doesn't want to have a clear plot structure, and then it wants that really fast towards the end. But it's absolutely enjoyable if you already like other Fallout games. It hits some emotional notes that are uncharacteristically melodramatic and emotional for the earlier games. We get some amusing what-if scenarios concerning elements we're familiar with. There's a completely inconsequential side mission where a gang of civilians band together to steal the power armor from a group of Brotherhood paladins and kill them. They then use it to terrorize their small community and assume control entirely because they are more or less invincible in it. The fact that so much chaos could ensue just by a couple dudes stealing a robot suit is a really great premise. There's also plenty of wholly new ideas that are only really seen in this game that are fun as a one-time inclusion, and I'm not really broken up that they don't make a return elsewhere. There are several bits of Fallout that show up in later games that have me thinking like, yeah, okay, I guess we can just do this again, sure. But a lot of this game seems to live in a little forgotten bubble that is kind of nice. Inside this tactics bubble, there's also a lot of grittier, slimier dialogue that honestly can be a little rough. A few times I could be heard muttering such phrases as the grounded and whimsical dichotomy that the franchise often plays with is pushed into further extremes, and look, there are some subjects that other Fallout games tackle a little more subtly, like racism, slavery, and sexual violence that this game is certainly a little less chill about, let's say. It takes these things and kind of tactlessly says, yeah, that's what's been going on this whole time, right? I thought that was obvious. It's also, I think, the game that makes the Brotherhood of Steel out to be the most deranged and morally suspect. Anytime you're congratulated for some heroic action that benefits the Brotherhood, it's subverted in a really dismissive way right at the end with some comment that makes them out to be just as cruel as any other faction in the Wasteland.
Well done. The scoundrels' bodies will be displayed in proper crucifixion outside the town of Quincy, along with the guards that were on watch. Our inquisitors have also rounded up known friends and family of the criminals to an internment camp.
Oh, great. That's great. It's good to have a support system.
You may proceed to the extraction point. Congratulations,
Thank
murderer.
They really do come off as assholes for most of this game, viewing the people they're meant to be saving as resources, training kids to use laser guns, ritually punishing and exiling them if they break said laser guns, going up to traders and asking if they sell Ligma. More than one character will describe them as being no better than raiders.
We both take what we want from these savages. If you think your cause is any more selfless than ours, you're sadly mistaken.
It is unquestionably a story that would have been more memorable if it was finished. People have scoured through the game files and sure, found remnants of abandoned story threads, but more tragically, just context, exposition that would have made you feel empathy for some characters, explained their motives, and it's just lost, so all you're left with are these hollow cartoon versions of them. It's like someone gave up assembling a piece of IKEA furniture because company was already knocking at the door, and they were just like, fuck it! I got my jungle skog, I got my cheese and crackers, and I got my second jungle skog.
Now, during each break, I'll name my MVD, most valuable Digimon. And the first one goes to Agumon.
I take a bitter comfort in the fact that I do think Microforte had some creative ideas for Fallout, and had they nailed that down a little earlier and had Interplay been more accommodating and not locked into a corporate fight or flight stance, those ideas would have hugely changed the tone and effectiveness of this story. The Fallout tactics that we got exists with the skeleton of an interesting story, but lacking much of the flesh that would elevate it beyond an uncanny ghoul. Clearly, both by design and due to unforeseen events, it never approaches the world building or character moments that Fallout and Fallout 2 were known for. But I also get the impression that they probably had a more manageable concept for the game and were mostly pressured into greater ambitions, creating too many plates to spin for such a small dev team. You have this facsimile of a winding story full of difficult subject matter and moral quandary, but really it's still just what it says on the box. It's a Fallout-themed tactics game. In the end, I think what is there is perfectly enjoyable despite being less intellectually stimulating. There's plenty of other ways it can stimulate you though. It's read articles online, it's trying for you. It's not another dose of Fallout, but it's pretty similar. And for this interpretation of Fallout, I think it sticks the landing. It ends perfectly on brand for what came before it, which is something I feel like most of the Fallouts from 3 forward have trouble with. There have been at least 2 Fallouts from Bethesda that I actually laughed a lot at the ending, because I'm really sorry, but I found it to be very bad. I mean, the ending to Fallout Tactics wasn't great, but most of it wasn't great, so all I can do is pat it on the back and say, good job, buddy. Let's put this on the fridge. You made it through the nightmare of you existing at all. For sure, any affection I have for this game is colored by it being my first Fallout, and what I think I'm trying to, in a roundabout way, say is nostalgia for the first incarnation of this franchise. I liked when the games were isometric and turn-based. I think that was a really fun format, and it's a shame it went out the way it did. Like a dog in the street. So I'm not gonna say I don't like the first-person Fallout games. I'm gonna say I despise them. Nah, but really, there's a lot I enjoyed about all of them, and when the next one comes out, you bet your ass I'm gonna play it and enjoy it less and less as it goes on until I'm left disillusioned once again. Tactics is the beginning of other creators who are not Black Isle taking parts of Fallout and keeping them not because they understand their meaning, but because it's cool. It's frustrating at times, but that's the thing. I gotta hand it to all Fallouts. It certainly is pretty cool. Along with that, what has helped maintain my appreciation for this game is it might not wholly understand the property, but it knows enough to throw ideas at it. Some of them interesting, and many of them, I want to say, harmless. Yeah, I guess you could do that. Just try not to get it on the furniture. It's such an obsessive nerd metaphor. Like Fallout Tactics is a bull in a china shop. Just sit still! Don't touch anything! Also, the isometric games were often pretty funny. Even this one had time to set up some classic nihilistic Fallout goofs. One moment that got me pretty good was during a rescue mission of sorts. You can find a super mutant locked up in a cell, and if you free him, he launches into this inspiring speech about taking the fight to the enemy, getting revenge for this injustice. Yeah, let's get them! Let's give these motherfuckers a war! I don't think the first-person Fallouts are all that funny, but a large part of that, in my opinion, is that it's battling to express a complicated thing through its game engine. An engine that often produces funnier moments simply by breaking every 5 minutes, as opposed to their genuine attempts at being witty or sardonic. But to be fair, Tactics has a number of edgy, smelly boy lines that kind of just happen to you.
My ass has seen more rubber than a dead rat in the middle of Route 66.
Yeah, hi, my name is... In keeping with the barrier to entry that Fallouts 1 and 2 held, Fallout Tactics changes up the format and creates new off-putting things to keep you from taking the plunge and seeing one of these games through to the end. With a new focus on tactical combat, Chris Taylor wanted to amend a common complaint for the previous games: companions, and more specifically, your inability to control them or get them to stop either shooting you or getting shot by you. Right from the start here, I'll tell you, they don't really accomplish that. That will be a persistent challenge in itself, but you have options that will help you mitigate that, and new features to play around with to fine-tune your experience. Much like the game's plot, there is a lot about Fallout Tactics' the devil gameplay that I think works, that feels right, and more that will test your patience, and an equal amount that is left unfinished. Digging deeper into its cut content and the notes left in the game files, you really get a feel for how many ideas were just left in the dust for the greater good of the mission. We're talking vital, key figures in this squad, left in the trenches, clutching a photo of their best gal, whispering, "Well, it looks like I ain't gonna make it home, Charlie." Looking at it now, I see their loss. I see the strange outline where something once stood. Including your player character, you get a squad of 6 Brotherhood initiates that all have the same amount of depth as any other Fallout character, almost to a fault. They have their own stats, traits, perks, and inventory that you have full control over. You might be thinking, well, if there's no dialogue options, then why do you have a charisma skill? That determines which potential squad mates you have access to. Then you might ask yourself, well, why does everybody else have charisma? And to that I would say, what are you gonna do, remove the C? Then what's the fun acronym gonna be? Sepia? The worst part about this is that I know, even when it's done, it's not going to be funny. I'm working for something that will have no payoff. I forgot about the L. Fuck. You decide your squad by visiting a personnel yeoman at one of the Brotherhood bunkers. As you progress, you'll unlock more and more possible squad mates that each have a proficiency, utility, and terrifying profile pick to be mindful of. It's probably best practice to have certain roles covered at all times, like heavy gunners, a medic, a mechanic, and a sniper, but you can also mix and match these as you see fit. Unlike you, if any of these guys die, it's not a game over. You just have to decide if you want to live without them and lug all their shit back home or load the game. This may also be the most diverse Fallout game as far as playable characters. You are sort of forced into the role of a basic human, but you can also recruit super mutants, ghouls, robots, and even Deathclaw into your squad. The bunkers are also where you can trade for new supplies and upgrades, as well as store your loot or vehicles in between missions. One of the more noteworthy scars left by content cuts are the appearance of Brotherhood medics. Each bunker has one, and they are even given spoken dialogue, where they, in pretty clear terms, explain to you what purpose they serve in the game, as if they were a tutorial, or rather, what purpose they would have served, if any of that functionality was left. At some stage in production, medics were going to be one of the main ways you heal major injuries or radiation poisoning, and they'd each have varying degrees of skill, with some being borderline butchers that you'd be rolling the dice with by even letting them check your pulse. As they stand in the finished game, they are essentially health item vendors. In one of the most biting yet unintentional bits of commentary, you hand over your hard-earned money for something other nations provide for free. There are 3 combat modes to choose from that you can cycle through at will. The first is what arguably got the game made, and what arguably is its most broken as well: CBT. CTB, or continuous turn-based, real-time essentially, but still using action points determined by agility. So it's less real-time and more like the rules are still happening just autonomously and without waiting for invisible dice rolls. Since you can turn this on and off, there are many circumstances where you can come out on top of a fight by barring your squad from entering combat until they are all split up behind cover or on some high ground, and then turn it on and watch them mow down a group of enemies. The game's verticality is an on-the-surface, small evolution of Fallout 1 and 2, but actually really significant the more you think about it. The game takes into account your height and awards you an advantage. It also changes level design so you can climb down into subterranean areas like trenches or climb up and post squad mates overlooking a battle from a ledge or a platform. Another new addition affected by this is that each squad mate has a changeable stance, like crouched and prone to switch between, which opens up many other tactical options. You can have a sniper lying prone while sneaking on top of a building overlooking a field, while your heavy dudes stroll in, and your support characters crouch behind sandbags and debris, emerging to give cover fire. You can also, outside of combat, just lob grenades to flush out hidden characters, which pretty often will just wind up exploding them rather extravagantly. The second mode is individual turn-based, which is very similar to the way the original games did combat, where you just go down the line of all combatants until it comes around to your turn again. This is the option I wound up using the least, instead opting for a combination of CTB and the third option, squad turn-based, where once combat is initiated, you get to move around all your little dudes in whatever order you wish, and then the computer gets its turn to move around everyone else. I will say, I can't think of many other games beyond maybe Stalker or something that gave me this much enjoyment whiplash. I don't know how to express to you how much fun parts of this game were for me. It's a rather long game considering what it is. It took me like a good week of playing it pretty consistently to get through it, and even when I wasn't playing it, I was thinking about playing it. I was having isometric dreams where I'd engage in some mundane daily behavior just governed by action points. It was insane. I'm insane. I'm a detriment to society. Kill me! The other side of the coin is that parts of it were completely demoralizing. I was at numerous times just defeated emotionally, physically, psychically, by Fallout Tactics for a number of reasons. It's one of those games where you're never quite sure if you're playing it correctly until you look up a walkthrough with the thought, okay, how was I actually supposed to do this? And they describe more or less what you did. The thing that felt like some weird cheat to cheese an enemy you're not actually capable of killing was what most other people decided to do as well. Not saying that didn't just legitimately happen as well, but so much of playing this game felt like tricking it into letting you win. You can also just get torn to shreds in a fucking instant, even if you have power armor and cover. Someone could be holed up in a trench with some kind of laser Gatling gun and just violently turn your buddy into a puddle. And it's weirdly shocking and sad when you pair that with how much work you do to strategically keep your dudes alive. Speaking of power armor, one thing I've always weirdly respected about this game is that it simply doesn't make power armor a big part of it. Even though the entire time you're in the Brotherhood of Steel and they have iconic power armor, that's like their thing, that's what they've made their personality out of. It drives home that having that is a special thing that not just any dirty recruit fresh out of the wastes gets to use. It's not until the final few missions that you can even afford to outfit more than one of your dudes with it. So there's a real sense of accomplishment when you get there. But the more guys you have with the armor, the more you can farm loot for money and thus afford more suits. Something further aided by something I initially thought nothing of, but wound up having a blast with, and that's the vehicles you have access to. You don't often get to use vehicles in actual missions, but you are required to travel to new missions and bunkers using the world map, and this will move along much more quickly if you have a vehicle. My favorite was the armored personnel carrier, which is a slow-moving tank of sorts that holds all of your guys inside it, and all of them can shoot out the windows. So in order to farm money and less common supplies, I just cruise around as a roving death machine, blasting anyone that got close to me, sitting comfortably in my car while everyone around me melts. Unless they break it, then I gotta get out and make my mechanic fix it back up. Then once the area was cleared, I'd send a dude or two out to gather all their shit and stuff it inside the APC, which doubles as a mobile items locker. I really found myself enjoying this loop of murder, collecting, car maintenance, and inventory management.
I got a little surprise for these mutant freaks. Carmageddon, motherfuckers.
Yeah, that's me. Always getting into something. But you gotta know when to hold them. And, well, I never quite remember the other part of that. Anyway, I guess you're probably wondering.
Even if you have been exposed to excessive fallout, you may eat and drink just as you normally would.
There are a few places I imagine you weren't meant to bring your vehicle, like this trench combat level, that I did anyway because I'm quirky like that. I would also just run over my dudes, mostly on purpose, because, you know, something to do up there. Since Micro Forte did cave to some Fallout fan demands, there is some fun stuff to discover by just exploring all corners of the world map. These appropriately include a bunch of wacky joke scenes and pop culture references, including references to other Interplay games. You can find Mort, your floating skull companion from Planescape, wandering around cursing the name of someone that sent him through a portal there. You can also kill him. You can find some gamers talking in era-appropriate leet speak, and you can also kill them. What about a traveling Nuka-Cola salesman that you can shoot?
Bro, did you kill all these people yourself? What the fuck? I don't like this. The vibe's off.
There is plenty of time spent outside of combat, and even though it is a problem in combat, outside of combat, you'll more frequently have to deal with one of the game's biggest annoyances, your squad's pathfinding. I can't remember a moment of this game where my dudes were just doing exactly what I wanted them to do. Standing in a decent formation that didn't result in them shooting each other, successfully climbing stairs or a ladder, or just not taking a bizarre meandering walk over to the spot a yard from where they were standing before. It can feel pretty gratifying nailing an enemy with a critical hit, especially in turn-based where you can actually comprehend what's happening. But sometimes I would get annoyed that if your squad is split up, as they might reasonably be, especially on one of the levels where you have to defend a base with several entrances, the camera will quickly whip away from what you're doing to go to the next person before your action is even done sometimes. So every now and then I wouldn't even get to see the destruction I've wrought.
Welcome to Earth. Where are you going? Ow. I missed it. Why did I say welcome to Earth?
There's a lot that could have been done to tighten up some basic mechanics, but as I understand it, it was notoriously difficult to QA test for. And it still feels like it needed that. It doesn't feel like the game it could have been by any means, and more so the game they had when the data ship arrived. I still think there's a lot of fun to be had in it, and some great ideas that advance the originals. It also feels like a really logical progression of power. You start out with cheap leather armor and old world guns, which in itself is sorta unseen in other Fallout games. Even in Bethesda's Fallout games, they have fun inventing an arsenal that mixes future designs and homemade duct tape and nails type weaponry, while many of the starting weapons and tactics are just real guns that I think realistically, wouldn't have gone anywhere. Sure, they might be a bit scuffed and rusty, but you can still kill people with them. Then as you rise in the ranks, you start getting access to heavier weapons and armor, as well as sniper rifles, and the game feels so drastically different with these resources. Of course, the difficulty also steadily increases, so unless you really follow a specific grind to the end, you never really feel over-prepared or unstoppable. You could equip one of your dudes with power armor and a minigun, but you're also gonna burn through ammo for that really fast, so should you use all your carry weight to hold more ammo, or a backup weapon that you'll likely find more ammo for? And what if you're up against enemies that aren't as affected by traditional ammo? There's a lot to consider and manage that I honestly had a blast with. Some of this is by design, and some of it is busy work created by game design missteps that the devs have owned up to. This may be the Fallout game with the most options as far as weaponry. Including melee and thrown weapons, there are over 150. There are so many different guns you'll come across, from downed enemies and lockers and chests. You'll be holding armfuls of them, laughing to yourself, what do I even do with all these? And ammo, what do I even do with all these different ammo types? I've never even seen a gun that can shoot these. What do I do with all this? No, I'm serious. What do I do with all this shit? You can find so many different guns that are more or less the same thing. They have the same stats, they just require some obscure ass ammo type that nobody will ever drop. You could maybe buy it from a vendor, but more often than not, you'd go up to them like, do you have 44 Magnum ammo? And they'll say, what the fuck are you even talking about, you worm, you sniveling weasel? And I'd say, oh, okay, sorry to bother you, sir. Even if you find some back alley ammo dealer, you just run out of it 10 minutes later and probably immediately find something to replace it on the floor that has a more common ammo type. I don't know what the rationale behind adding so many pointless and redundant gun options was, because ultimately what you'll end up using is what you come across the most. The forces you fight typically stick to 1 or 2 weapon ammo types, and then the odd specialty weapon like a rocket launcher or a machine gun will pop up for a surprise. Basic 9mm and 7.62mm 9mm ammo was so plentiful that I'd wind up just dropping handfuls of them as I picked up more important or more expensive shit. I'd literally use these to obsessively balance the scales of my weight limit. Just pick up something that made me encumbered and then flick aside bullet by bullet until I could move again. And you know what? I loved every fucking second of it. It's an odd appreciation I have for this game in that I feel like all the things I try to sell you on are things that are understandably frustrating, annoying, or tedious. But it's like once you break through that and find that you've adequately planned for a certain circumstance or successfully triggered some kind of maneuver, ooh, it's like little else. You also develop a sort of camaraderie with your squad. You become protective of them and good at utilizing their strengths.
Hey, he's attacking that lady! Light him up, boys! No need to thank us, ma'am. It's all in a day.
I get it, okay? I know you're angry with me. I know you hate looking at this game optimized for widescreen. Honestly, I'm not crazy about it either. You think I want to strain my eyes? Flip my Coke bottle glasses up and down trying to make sense of what all these little critters are doing on my screen? Well, I can't turn back time. Actually, I think I installed a patch and forgot that I did because the Steam version wasn't recording properly. Either way, just picture this game like zoomed in. I know you can't do that for me, but I want you to try anyway. As someone that already adored isometric games with pre-rendered environments, this game is a non-stop delight to look at. It takes the aesthetic of Fallout 1 and upscales it, making the assets not only more clear, but more varied and plentiful. Even with some desert or snow areas clearly tiled a little cheaply, there is so much detail and care put into what populates them. They even threw in a little dig at that process through graffiti. And when you walk under certain obstructions, you can watch them grow for some reason. I feel like we could have found a more elegant solution for that, like they become faintly transparent, like in Diablo or something, but since level design takes strategic combat into consideration, even basic raider bases or improvised camps are littered with rusted out cars, corrugated metal bound in barbed wire, and assorted piles of junk to take cover behind. Little touches of animation breathe a lot of life into these places through trash can fires and bubbling puddles of toxic slime. I'm just so enamored by it, even when it's lazy, it's good. There's a day and night cycle that I don't know how to track exactly, but you can start a mission during the middle of the day, and by the end of it the sun will have set and light sources will emit a lovely atmospheric glow. Even if you engage in a fight with laser weapons, each beam of light fired will light a path to your enemy. It's a little consideration that if they forgot, I probably wouldn't have even noticed, but they didn't, and because of that, I'll put off the inevitable for one more day. Level design really gets shown off whenever you're in a Brotherhood bunker or one of the robot facilities. They look almost mesmerizingly industrial and alien compared to the rest of the landscape. In part lifeless, not meant for human manipulation, but also slightly flourished in an Art Deco kind of way. And because you see so much on screen at one time, it felt like looking at one of those educational cross-section books from when I was a kid where they like show a detailed drawing of a boat or a castle or some shit and cut it in half so you can see all the inner workings. But you're a bunch of little dudes running around in it. Little guys that can die in horrifying ways. That's definitely one thing that stayed with me from the first time playing it until now. Maybe it's this sort of detached bird's eye view of everyone, but your little guys get fucked up, and it's really gnarly. Well, so do all the dudes you kill. The death animations are extravagant, and there's a variety of them depending on what kind of weapon you're using. You can snipe dudes, making them twirl around with an intense arterial spray, making an arc of blood around them, or straight split them in half with a hail of machine gun fire, blow them up into little bits, melt them with plasma weapons. It's amazing. I mean, it's horrific. It's vile. My little guys, my little dudes, just getting squished like ants.
I just want to set the world on fire. No God in the sky. We will wither and will die. Inside my heart there is just piss and more piss. it say? My heart is made of piss. So fucking stupid.
Until they make you kill dogs, of course, because they saw fit to make that every bit as unpleasantly rendered. One point of contention with OG Fallout fans was the liberties taken with creating variation among models, specifically with models like the super mutants. For whatever reason, Microforte thought a good way to differentiate them from each other would be to give them vibrantly colored accents, which looks a little odd, but it is such a small infraction among other pressing things that I couldn't be bothered to give a shit. The real concern is the lack of rats, and speaking of which, that's right, it's the rat roundup. If you're a fan of rats and are looking for something to fill the rat-shaped hole in your life, to slake your thirst for rat content in a video game, well, Fallout Tactics might not be the best place to look. There isn't much in the way of classic rats, scurrying around doing their thing while you adventure, squeaking and such, transferring slices of pizza to their subterranean lair. What we do get is the occasional random encounter with big enemy mutant rats that don't quite look rat enough to positively affect their score on the rat roundup. However, in the rat roundup, we treat all rats equally, and therefore I award Fallout Tactics my highest rat roundup rating. Good! Voice acting is all mostly very good. Professionally done by recognizable voice actors you've definitely heard in other games. And the odd stunt casting.
Look, I don't want to die. Get this fucking rig off me. Do it, Grunts. You guys are expendable. I'm senior.
There just isn't much of it, mostly due to the fact that the game had to be shipped worldwide on day one, so the script had to be locked down pretty early so it could be translated. This unfortunately minimized the use of voice acting and left a number of inconsistencies with it, as well as typos. Like most Fallout games, Ron Perlman returns as the narrator and is also given a lot more to narrate than usual, as each arc of the game gets its own little cutscene introduction featuring him and some animatics. But the other notable roles include Arlie Ermey as General Barnaky, a guy who you've probably seen or heard in some piece of media, likely as a military guy of some sort. Anything from Full Metal Jacket to Toy Story to any number of commercials. He has since passed on, but I'm sure he's looking up at us and not remembering doing this job at all.
Somebody picked the wrong house.
He does his thing, though there are times where he doesn't really sound like his heart's in it. Maybe he was making a choice here to show that Barnaky is like a conflicted kind of guy, but he just sounds spaced out a lot of the time, and like he is quite literally just reading words on a paper.
Welcome, warrior. We now know that the Beast Lord's lair lies within an underground labyrinth in the region of Mardin. The Beast Lord's lair lies within...
General Decker is played by Kurtwood Smith, who you may know from movies like RoboCop and a bunch of Star Trek shit. I don't know, what my fucking IMDb. He does a perfectly serviceable job.
If they have information about any weak links in our security, we will find out. If they don't, they will be placed in a labor camp to prevent the spread of rumors and ensure proper security.
Everyone else, zero complaints, and most of them pull double or even triple duty, voicing several characters, some of which have names. The soundtrack for this game is interesting, and unlike the previous two, it is not composed by Mark Morgan, but another guy now synonymous with Fallout, Enon Zur, who would go on to do all the soundtracks for Fallout going forward from